Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of analysis from LindyFact titled Why Iran Won't Collapse Under Systemic Military Operations. We're going to dive deep into a persistent blind spot in modern geopolitical strategy, basically asking why analysts and strategists so often misjudge the resilience of ancient, complex societies. We're looking at a systems-based approach here, and it honestly completely flips the standard script on warfare, infrastructure, and societal collapse. So let's dive right into this puzzle. If you follow international news at all, you've probably noticed a pattern. Western strategists and geopolitical experts are constantly looking at top-down, mechanistic metrics. They watch a country's GDP contract, they see targeted infrastructure getting destroyed, they monitor supply chain disruptions, and based on those dropping numbers, they predict imminent societal collapse. But here's the catch. Time and time again, that collapse just never happens. The society holds together. Why is that? Well, the source we're analyzing today argues that these experts are fundamentally misreading the situation. Why? Because they're using the totally wrong analytical framework from the get-go. All right, moving into Section 1, the fatal analytical flaw, or misunderstanding the system. According to the analysis, the fatal flaw here is confusing a simple, brittle system with a deeply complex organic system. Think about a modern Western power grid or a just-in-time supply chain. That's a simple system. It's linear, it's top-down, and it is hyper-dependent on every single node functioning correctly. If you remove just one piece, like if a bridge drops or a server farm goes offline, the whole structure falters and panic sets in almost immediately. But LindyFact points out that ancient societies like Iran, they aren't machines. They're complex, organic systems. They don't rely on brittle, centralized nodes for their existential sense of order. Instead, they're dynamic. When a node is disrupted, a bottom-up, self-organizing intelligence takes over to keep the baseline of daily life moving forward.
It's absolutely crucial to understand the concept of an emergent property. The source uses a really fantastic analogy here, an ant colony. Just imagine dropping a heavy leaf right across an established ant trail. The colony doesn't suddenly go into a systemic crisis, right? The ants don't just freeze in place and wait for some central command to send a bulldozer. Instead, they individually and collectively fan out. They explore the obstacle, and they organically forge a brand new path around it. Their order is an emergent property. It bubbles up from local, hyper-interconnected elements. And the argument is that when a bomb drops or a power grid goes dark in a complex society, the exact same thing happens. A decentralized resilience activates. People instantly find alternative ways to share resources and communicate, completely bypassing the broken centralized system.
That brings us to Section 2, the Lindy survivor effect, and looking at time as a measure of resilience. To really understand how a society develops this ant-like bottom-up resilience, we have to look at something called the Lindy effect. This is a foundational principle in systems theory. It basically states that the future life expectancy of a non-perishable thing, so think a technology, an idea, or society, is directly proportional to its current age. In plain English, if something has survived for a very, very long time, its very existence proves it possesses an indomitable durability. It hasn't decayed. Actually, every passing century is just more proof of its robust capacity to adapt to stress. Which brings us to this absolutely staggering number, 7,000. According to the source material, this is the number of years of continuous history Iran has. Under the Lindy framework, a society with 7 millennia of unbroken continuity is a highly Lindy survivor. It's not fragile. In fact, it is the exact opposite of a brittle system.
Just think about it. Over 7,000 years, this cultural DNA has been violently stress-tested by literally every conceivable disaster. We're talking centuries of devastating famines, massive foreign invasions. They've watched entire empires rise to absolute power and then completely collapse into dust. So when you place modern systemic military operations like economic blockades or infrastructure strikes on this timeline, you realize something pretty profound. To this society, modern warfare isn't some unprecedented, world-ending apocalypse. It's basically just Tuesday. It's simply the latest in a 7,000-year string of obstacles that their collective consciousness already knows exactly how to navigate.
Let's move into Section 3, History in the Brainstem, or what's called the biological sediment. Now here's where the analysis takes a truly provocative turn. The author argues that culture isn't just something soft. It's not just poetry and rituals and languages. When a society persists under extreme stress for 7,000 years, culture actually acts as a Darwinian environmental force. It's long enough to exert selective pressure on biological mechanisms. The source suggests that those who possessed an inherent emergent capacity to adapt to war and famine didn't just pass down better survival stories, they actually passed down the biological predispositions that made their survival possible in the first place. So the crucial takeaway here is how the distinction between culture and biology blurs. The analysis breaks it down into gene-culture coevolution. Over millennia, repeated stress leaves epigenetic markers. These are basically chemical tags on our DNA that carry the memory of ancestral trauma and resilience across generations. What this means in practice is that the drive to protect the homeland isn't just a political choice. It's a visceral, intuitive drive to protect an ancestral lineage. According to this framework, a population's response to disorder is wired directly into their nervous system. It effectively gets right under the skin, priming them for the exact same challenges their ancestors faced thousands of years ago.
Finally, Section 4, the external miscalculation, and why simple lenses fail.
Let's look at how this biological and systems theory applies directly to modern geopolitical strategies today. The source impartially lays out a massive disconnect between external military strategies and the actual ground reality. When external powers look at a complex system through a simple system lens, they make catastrophic miscalculations. If you destroy military hardware, you mistakenly believe you've broken the nation. But in reality, you've left the organic, emergent network entirely intact. If you try to crush the formal economy, you just activate those decentralized alternative networks. And if you target a political regime, you miss the fact that the population isn't fighting for a temporary government. They are fiercely defending an ancestral lineage with a literal brainstem-level response. You really cannot defeat a population that doesn't rely on centralized systems for its survival.
You can shatter concrete, you can halt oil production, and you can sever communication lines. But you cannot break an emergent organic network. To a deeply complex ancient society, the destruction of infrastructure is not an end state. It's just a messy landscape to be traversed. The North Star of their cultural and biological identity remains entirely untouched by the loss of physical assets. Just like those ants navigating around the leaf, they will always find a messy, non-Western, and entirely indomitable way forward.
Which leaves us with this final thought. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with simple metrics and dramatic predictions of collapse. But if this analysis holds true, if complex, ancient societies naturally and organically adapt to systemic destruction by relying on millennia of encoded resilience, how does this change the way you interpret tomorrow's breaking headlines? The next time you see a report about a blockaded economy or a destroyed power grid, ask yourself, are you looking at a brittle machine that's about to break, or an ancient organism that is just beginning to adapt? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the frameworks you use to view the world.